Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. Did you know that the original plans for the city of Kirtland and Independence had 24 temples? David Hall is the chairman of Hall Labs, and he's been studying this a lot. And he's going to tell us what the purpose of those 24 temples were. You won't want to miss this episode. Check it out.
So, one of my big questions about, in fact, I love to bring this, I just mentioned this to somebody and I said, did you know there were supposed to be 24 temples in Independence? And they were like, what? And I don't know, temples might not be the best word for that, because I think they're more of administrative buildings. Can you talk about what the function of those 24 buildings were supposed to be?
There's 24 presidents in each local community.
Okay.
They're all with different functions, so much difference that they deserve a building. So the 24 buildings are teaching you the variety of problems that the community has to solve. It's not a Sunday school class. It's not a Sunday-only church. It's the whole ball of wax, right? So 24 presidents, 8 presidencies, 8 boards. You know, you put the 4 courts together, you end up with boards. All kinds of internal controls, which we don't have in the church at all because we're top down. And, you know, all this very sophisticated system is laid out for us. We read our scriptures, but we don't believe them. We don't pay any attention to 48 priests and 24 teachers and 12 deacons and 12 on a high council and 96 elders. We just, that's not us.
No, I will tell you, I've been in 2 wars actually where they split the elders quorum because we got more than 96.
Yeah, but we don't, they're village presidents.
Right.
All right, they have huge responsibility, a real thing, not just moving chairs after church, right? And so, you know, there's huge, great responsibilities for 480 people fit in each assembly hall. All of those positions are specific duties, totally unique.
Now you say 24 presidents. I know some of them, but I'm not sure all of them. So we've got a deacon's quorum president, which right now...
Presidency.
So right now it's not a bunch of 12-year-olds. These were seasoned men.
There's only 12 deacons in a whole community of 100,000 people.
Yeah, now that's interesting. Okay. So we've got a deacon's quorum, we've got a teacher's quorum, we've got a priest quorum, we have an elder's quorum,
and high priest.
High priest. Is there 70s? Because I know they had 70s back then.
70s and apostles are at the general level. They're not local at all. This is all local.
Because I remember when my dad, so this was when President Kimball was there, they dissolved this stake 70s quorum. Because my dad was a 70. And so then I know they had to decide, are we going to take these men who have been stake 70s, we put them in the elders quorum or the high priest. My dad was made a high priest. So I thought that was back then as well. I know Elijah Abel was a 70, but he wasn't a general 70. He was like a stake 70.
Yeah, if you study carefully the history of the church, it was never meant to be centralized. That's just in the modern age that we've taken that on. There were churches, right? And each church is a local, independent financially and politically, and large, 100,000 people, totally independent. So, for instance, even in 94 and 95 in other sections, it talks about setting up a church, right, in Independence, in Kirtland, right? So you have to have a local organization for that church that's sustainable and doesn't have top-down problems and doesn't have conflicts. That's why there's 480 unique positions. The Lord was serious when he said, every man has to learn his duty and stand in the office, all right? Okay, and hey, I'll prepare a place for them in his house, right? They all have equal offices in the houses of the Lord. They all have a chair in the assembly hall, specific.
Yes.
And there's 480 of them times 4, because there's 4 demographic groups. Single men, single women, married men, married women are divisions, all equal. So 1833, we already had the answer. Not only do women get the priesthood, but single men and single women.
Okay.
So right now, we totally discriminate against single men. We don't view they're worth nothing, right?
Yeah, they're not married.
Yeah, polygamy would have never happened if we'd had this set up right, because the single men would have said, no way. Not just the women. The single men would have said, this is not fair. Who am I going to marry, right?
All right, so deacons, teachers, priests, elders, high priests, those are 5.
Yeah.
We got 19 more to go. What are some of those other 19 presidencies that we're talking about?
Well, you've got, remember the Kirtland Temple has 12 seats on one side,
Right.
4 rows of 3, 12 on the other,
Right.
4 rows of 3. So that's 24 presidents, right? Those are the 24 presidents.
Okay.
It's 8 presidencies, 24 presidents. And they all have different responsibilities. It's not a bishopric or a presidency like we think of.
Right.
So it's not one top dude and 2 lackeys, right?
Okay.
It's 3 presidents who form a presidency, and they're so different from each other, they have a different building.
Okay.
But they're in a row, so the rows of buildings exactly match the rows of chairs.
Okay, so you would have a high priest, you would have 3 high priest presidents, and 3 elders quorum presidents, and 3 deacons presidents, and teachers, okay.
And 3 presidents over the Aaronic priesthood,
Okay.
and it's not a bishop, that was an add-in,
Oh, yeah.
and 3 presidents over the Melchizedek priesthood. We never talk about those things. At the local level.
Okay, so that kind of takes care of the 24 presidencies. So are you saying, because we're trying to get in the single women and the single men in there, how do they fit in those?
You're commanded to build 2 buildings.
Okay.
That's 4 assembly halls. All the same.
Okay.
Commanded to be exactly the same. How do you fill it? There's only 4 demographic groups that are equal. Married men, married women, single men, single women are 25% of the population each.
Okay. So, I want to make sure I understand this. One of those floors would be for single women, and they would have Melchizedek priesthood presidents.
And Aaronic priesthood responsibilities.
That are women.
Yeah. And single men. Same thing.
Okay.
And married men and married women.
And that's in section 94 and 95?
You can get it all from 94 and 95 in the plat and the plan. It's clear as a bell.
Wow.
So it predicted our predicament way back before we went silly, right?
Okay.
It's there for us, 1833 predicting where we're at demographically, vision of the future, and where we need to go organizationally. And it's not central. It's a whole bunch of independent local systems. They're big enough to matter. Our existing stakes are not big enough to matter. But 100,000 active people and filling 1,920 positions and 38 and 40 captains. I haven't even talked about the captains, but there's captains of 10s.
Right.
And so there's more than 6,000, lay ministers running this thing.
Okay.
Out of 100,000 people.
And so the idea was in both Independence and Kirtland, Joseph was going to have 100,000 people in each city.
Totally independent.
Totally independent. And so, because I've always wondered about that, it always seems strange to me. Joseph had a revelation that, hey, we're going to have Independence be a headquarters, but he never actually went there until 1836 when he kind of got run out of town.
Yeah, when he got run out of town. He wouldn't have gone.
He was staying there, and it just seems like that was really a huge, I think it's a huge administrative challenge, even in today's world, but especially in 1833, they didn't have phones, they didn't have, even a telegraph or fax machine, and it seems like it really got away from Joseph.
Yeah, and the problem is they went central, all right? And so even locally, they only thought of 3 presidents at the most, or one kind of running it, right? Instead of, they never caught on to the 24 and the 480, real decentralized, specific, it's called, in modern organizational behavior, it's called matrix organization. Extremely sophisticated. I mean, it's well known in organizational behavior today, but it wasn't at all back then. All they knew was hierarchy.
Right.
So that's all they could mimic, right? So you've got a 12 being put together, told not to have any presiding officer specifically, and to rotate presiding, among them, and even rotate taking the notes. A few weeks later, Marsh is wanting to be boss, right? Because he's the oldest, right? And we're right into hierarchy, and they're even putting their chairs in order, like the apostles do today.
Yeah.
It happened that quick. So it's just amazing how our traditions of hierarchy and single power just ingrain us. We want one boss.
Right.
We don't want 12 bosses. And in section 2,
when one person.
and so Joseph Smith loves it. He even he gives seer stones to everybody, right? So then he gets mad when Hiram Page has a revelation. Because, I'm out of control, right? Yeah. And so he has this revelation of convenience, in my view, where he puts himself top dog, right? And nobody else can say anything. So it's just our need for a top boss, right? We don't like to have to discuss and figure things out. We would rather think and hope that somehow God comes down and zaps us, right? It doesn't happen. Come on. Oliver Cowdery himself has said, no, you have to study it out in your mind. You have to be inspired. You have to work with each other. It's just not going to come to you like this. But 12 people working together so well that they can actually agree, that's tough.
Yeah, that is tough.
I think the 12 nowadays are closer to it than they've ever been. And so there might be hope that we can decentralize eventually. And then the 12 and their 70, what they do is set up stakes, which are these communities, right? Totally independent. That's what they were told to do, right? Go out into the world and convert it and set up stakes, right? It's right in our own scriptures.
So a stake should have 100,000 people, is that right?
Yeah, it says in the Platt 15 to 20,000, but the Platt language is in 1530s, early modern English, and you only counted the head of household. So you have to multiply it by 5 or 6 at the time, and plus there's a whole bunch of other things that don't triangulate at the lower population. It doesn't make sense to have 5,000 lay ministers, over 20,000 people.
Right.
And also the buildings don't work together, and the use of the 24 buildings don't work. And remember, there's a great big huge bishop storehouse area that's like the modern Vivint Stadium, right? All together. How do you make all those things work with only 20,000 people? It doesn't work.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with David Hall, chairman of Hall Labs in Provo, Utah. In our next conversation, we're going to talk about the idea that Joseph didn't use King James English, he used 1530 William Tyndale English. Why is that? Well, it turns out that you need to understand that in order to understand some of Joseph's revelations.
Like's been done for the Book of Mormon, right? Then, in fact, that's what the Book of Mormon was written in too, just like the Platt. Now, mile is an English mile, which is 6,336 feet. Street is a public square, and on and on and on. And now you can translate it correctly.
Well, you mentioned also to me earlier that the word bishop meant banker.
Yeah. Well, in 1530, there was no difference between church and state, right?
Okay.
The problem is the restoration happened when church and state were separate, right? And Joseph's trying to put it together and it not working, right?
So a lot of times we talk about, Joseph Smith used King James English.
No, he used Tyndall English.
Yeah, and so why? Because King James, so why 1530 English? Is it William Tyndall?
Well, Tyndall did the English Bible that went to the world, right? And the Lord wants them to be companions.
If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, please subscribe to patreon.com/gospeltangents for just $5 a month. Patreon is spelled patreon.com/gospeltangents. If you'd like to watch the entire video, you can subscribe at YouTube, Patreon, or on my website at gospeltangents.com and click the yellow subscribe button for just $8 a month. PDF transcripts are just $10 a month, and you can get those on patreon.com/gospeltangents or on my website. I'll send those to you as soon as I've finished completing it. If you'd like to get a paperback and PDF, just subscribe for $20 a month at either Patreon or on my website. Individual paperbacks are available at Amazon.com. Just do a search for Gospel Tangents Interview, and you can find all of our past interviews there. Show your Gospel Tangents pride by purchasing a t-shirt on our website at gospeltangents.com/shop. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts at tinyurl.com/gospeltangents. You can get our latest updates by friending me at Facebook, or you can also follow our page at facebook.com/gospeltangents. Become an insider and you can see the newest videos. Follow us on Twitter at Gospel Tangents. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here we've got some of our great videos. Thanks again.